Hey now, it is cheese making day, and today we're going to be basically making a recipe for a fresh kind of farmer style cheese. This is reminiscent of a recipe that my wife used to make with her avó when she was a kid in Portugal, visiting over there, but we're sort of doing a little bit of a modern twist on it based on some of the processes and equipment that I've got here now that we've gotten into making cheese. So either way, I think it's going to be fun, and come along for the ride. First off here, I want to mention that everything has been sanitized. First off, the pot that we'll actually be making the cheese in here initially with the milk, I threw a little bit of just filtered water in there and boiled it for a little bit. Also, I used my regular cheese making pot here and threw a bunch of the other stainless equipment in here and boiled that for a bit just to get that initially sterilized. And then everything else through this process here, I am also either going to use a 2% bleach solution and spray that down. I've done that sort of with like my ripening box and some of the other later on tools. And then some of the stuff that I'm using right away, I just used a 75% isopropyl alcohol solution here that I've got in a spray bottle. And that's sort of how I'm doing my on-the-go sanitizing for certain things here. So just assume that everything's sanitized. All right, we're going to be using a gallon of milk for this. This is a 3.5%, a whole milk, and it is not homogenized. This is what we want to start off with here. So I picked this up at like a natural sort of health food store. That's usually the best place to find these non-homogenized milks, unless you happen to know a farmer or something like that. I do not, so here I am paying a bunch of money for this fancy milk. This is like a 5.5 quart pot, and what I've got here is basically the max amount that I could put in here, since that's 4 liters of milk. I'm currently heating up the milk. I am going to be adding some other ingredients here, but I just wanted to point out, so I'm doing this here with a hot water bath. This is sort of a fancy way to do it, just to ensure that we're not going to scald the milk, and just do it at a really nice, gentle warm up. I've only had this going here for about 10 minutes, and we've already gone up just about 25 degrees, so it's not going to take too terribly long. Alternatively, you could do this on the stove top, just making sure you've got a really low temperature. Again, you don't want to risk scalding any of that milk. Into this 1 gallon of milk, I want to add 2 tablespoons of salt. I'm going with some pink sea salt here. Then I've got a half teaspoon of liquid rennet here, and it's been diluted in a 1/4 cup of distilled water. And then I've got an 1/8 teaspoon of calcium chloride, and that has been diluted in right around an 1/8 of a cup of, again, distilled water. And that's going to hopefully help these curds just coagulate a little bit quicker. And now with both of those in there, I'm just going to take my wire whisk here, and I'm going to just help make sure everything is incorporated fully throughout. And just a few minutes later here, I've hit my target temperature of right around 97 degrees Fahrenheit. I was going for like 96 to 98, and here we are right in the middle. I've also reduced the temperature on the precision cooker, and I just sort of swapped out some of the water to get that down really quickly here. And we're going to now remove this thermometer. I'm going to get that cover over top and let it sit for 90 minutes. For the record, I'm going to point out that the way that my wife described this part of the process was heating the milk up until you could just barely stand getting your finger into it. But I mean, she's way tougher than I am, so I don't take that. I have no idea what that means. Molten lava, something like that. Either way, it's hotter than I actually wanted here, so that's why we're going for that slightly more precise temperature range. After that 1.5 hours, we are ready to test this out and see if we have a nice clean break here. I've just got my blade, and I'm going to just take a look here. I'd say that looks pretty good. So what we want to do here is cut in approximately 2-inch cubes. We're going to do this by cutting on a 45-degree angle this way. Of course, now my precision cooker's in the way. We'll make it work. And then also this way here. And starting to shift on me here a little bit. So we'll get these cut, and then I'm going to throw the cover back on here and let this sit for 15 minutes. So at 15 minutes of resting after that, it was just to allow some extra whey to come out of the curds. Before I go to transfer, I'm just going to try to get some of this excess whey out of here. And now I've got this cheese mold here, and it does have a follower with it. I've just put some cheesecloth into it, and I've got it inside one of my ripening boxes here, just with a rack on the bottom so that we can drain more of this whey out. I'm just going to take this slotted spoon here and transfer. Here we are. This 8-inch mold is really quite full, but it is still acceptable. What we're going to do here is let this start to drain out for a bit. We can see that we've got a bunch of that whey coming out. In just a moment here, I'm probably going to lift this out, drain out some of that whey, and then let it continue draining. As soon as the curds sank down and compressed low enough that we could fit the follower on there, we placed it on top and then actually weighed it down using the pot that we were putting the excess whey into. That started off initially around 8 pounds, and we were just draining out the whey that was coming out of the curds into that pot, and it wound up sort of peaking around 9 pounds by the time we finished adding whey to that pot. And then because we were wanting a fairly compressed cheese, my wife decided to call upon her Força Portugal roots and actually get some of this done by hand. She wanted to be able to sort of feel exactly how compressed it was getting. So still leaving this in the form and having the cheesecloth on there, she just sort of worked her hands around, pressing down with her palms. This is a fairly effective manner of releasing whey from the curds fairly quickly, and this is exactly how her grandmother used to do it, so she wanted to make sure to, of course, incorporate that same process. After a while of working this by hand, we had it at the point where we could have decided to leave it if we wanted a slightly thicker and more moist cheese, but we were wanting to get something a little bit more compressed and a little bit drier just for our purposes. So we wound up throwing a 10-pound weight on this here, top of the follower, and we let this sit for in between 6 to 8 hours. Here we go. We have this skinny little cheese. I'll just dump out this excess whey. Then we're just going to go back onto this rack, cover up the ripening box, and pop it into the refrigerator overnight. And after letting this sit in the refrigerator overnight, I'm going to pull this out. You can see that this is fairly skinny. We're probably about 1.25 inches thick here. Had we gone with extra milk in that pot, we could have gone with a thicker finished cheese if we were using this particular mold and whatnot. However, just the plans that we have for it were super good with a thinner cheese. So now I just want to unwrap this from the cheesecloth. A bit of a textured moon surface over here. So here we are now, ready to cut in and give it a little taste. You see we've got this cheese here. It's nice and condensed. And of course, we need to try this out. Okay. So it just smells very, very light. No sort of pungent aromatics or anything like that coming off of it, obviously, because it's just very plain. As far as the texture goes here, it's not quite creamy, but it's just the littlest bit crumbly, and yet it still holds together reasonably. Just a little bit of saltiness to it. It's perfect. This is going to go very, very nicely with our bruschetta and focaccia bread. While I wait for that focaccia to cool down, get a little Maldon salt on there. Oh, and that just has that little crunch to it. Okay, we gotta make a little treat here. And there we are. A little homemade bruschetta with that fresh kind of Portuguese farmer's cheese on there, and then some homemade focaccia bread. Don't judge me. Almost lost my cheese. Oh. Okay. That's exactly what we were after. We were looking for this nice, fresh, light cheese that we could add to this focaccia bread with some nice bruschetta on it. The bruschetta has all those bold flavors going on, a little spicy, some basil, the acidity of the tomatoes, all that. The nice soft focaccia bread there, and then that nice, almost creamy, fresh cheese on there just really seals the deal here. So there you have it, fairly simple recipe. Definitely some ways you can kind of play around with that if you want. Fairly simple ingredients though. And of course with this you can sort of tweak it, play around with it, decide exactly what you want that finished texture to be like, just depending on how much of that whey you get out of there, whether you want it really nice and crumbly, almost closer to like a ricotta or something like that, or some other fresh cheeses, or whether you want it slightly more towards the condensed and creamy end like we made here today. If you do give it a whirl, let me know how it turns out for you, and until next time, keep your cheese at 11.